Hello there. In this video, I'll show you the overall syntax of creating a database and a table in SQL. By the end of this video, you should be able to know major data types, create and drop databases and tables by using SQL, create table by importing CSV files. If you don't know what database is, then please refer to my previous videos. Now, let's get started working with SQL. First, before we go ahead and do some coding, let's talk about data types. Each of the tables in a database includes a collection of columns, and each column contains data of a specific type, such as characters, numbers, dates, and others. Understanding the data types helps you to know what kind of data we're dealing with. There are actually three most commonly used data types, and they are character, numeric, and date time. The character data type can be represented as CHARN, which indicates the character value with fixed length n. It is not a frequently used data type, character data type, by the way. Whereas varchar n or varchar n, however you pronounce it, is mostly used as a character data type. Varchar n indicates the character value with the variable length of n. For example, varchar 5 stores a maximum of 5 characters. Another character type is text, which indicates the character value with the variable unlimited length. Here we don't have to specify the specific length of character variable. Okay, now let's talk about the numeric data type. Here in this table, you can see various numeric data types, description of it, and the range for each of the data types. The commonly used numeric data types are integer, decimal, and serial. If you want to have each subsequent observation to be recorded as in incremental order, then you use the serial number. It actually depends what numeric type you used based on your requirement. And here is another commonly used data types, and that is the related to the date. The first is timestamp, that provides data along with hour, minute, second, whereas the other one is called date data type, that only provides date in the date format. Now you know the major data types. Let's talk about creating database and the table in PostgreSQL. As we talked earlier, a database may contain one or more tables. While creating a table or tables within a database, we need to define the data variables and their various data types, like we just discussed earlier. That's why it's very important to understand what data types to use for a particular variable within a table. For example, let's say we want to create a database and let's call it sample for now. In this case, we can simply use the create database sample in PostgreSQL. And this is as simple as it gets to create a database in the SQL. Now let's create a table in PostgreSQL. We can simply use the create table statement in SQL to create a new table. Here in this example, we are creating an employee table containing 6 variables, and these variables have different data types. I have assigned an employee ID as a serial type and also a primary key. Some other variables are first name and gender, which are variable character types. That's how I defined, like by using varchar 50, meaning the variable first name can store a maximum of 50 characters. We also put constraint as not null for the first name, meaning this variable can't have any null values in it. Other variables in this table are hire date, which is a date type, salary, and years in school, and they are defined as integer type. Now let's talk about dropping a database or table. To drop any database or table, we can simply use drop statement in SQL, such as drop database will drop the database, whereas drop table will drop the specified table. Drop table also has if exists command, which will drop the table if it already exists. Otherwise, it will inform that there is no such table available. Drop table if exists would be better if we have lots of tables and we don't know like if they already exist in the database. However, you need to be cautious while using this because you may have an important table already in a database and you probably don't want to delete that, right? So you have to keep that in mind as well while using drop if exists table name. Now you know how to create and drop a database and also a table directly in SQL. Let's talk about creating tables by importing CSV file. It's a two-step process actually. The first is you need to create an empty table to hold the data, and second, you need to copy data from the CSV file into that table that you already created earlier. In this example, here we have created an, I call it imp demographics to show the demography of the employee. And then the data for this table is imported from the CSV file employee demographic.csv. Next, let's go to pgadmin and do some hands-on practice and creating dropping databases and tables. This will help you to understand more about this in detail. Alright, in this video, I showed you how to create databases and also tables using PostgreSQL. Particularly, you've learned about statements like create database, create table, drop database, drop table, and drop table if exists, and also how to import data from the CSV file. Alright, so let's go to pgadmin here. Alright, here I am. Now you need to insert your password that you created earlier when you install your pgadmin and PostgreSQL. Now go to servers, and then you can see one of them. Just go inside one of them, and then now you can see the database's name, like database one. There is only one database called Postgres, right? So in this example, we want to create some database and also tables within the database. I will just open my query tool. You can actually start from here, from this blank page, but I have sample script created, so I'm just going to bring that in so we can start from there. So first, let me delete this for now. Let's create the main objective is to create, like, let's say an example database and how we can drop it and create a sample database. Within that, we're going to create employee, manager, and department tables, and that will be used in our other analysis as well in future. Let's first create how we can create the database in SQL. We can basically use create database, and let's call it example DB, example database, and select it, run it, query returned successfully. Now if you refresh this, you can see two databases. One is the example DB, right? And you can actually drop, if you don't need any database, then you can drop database just simply using drop database if exists sample example DB, and then you can run it. See, query returned successfully. Now you can when you refresh it, you no longer have this example DB. One thing to note is that for example here it says that make sure this database is disconnected first, otherwise you won't be able to delete. So in our case, this database is not connected, right? See this little red cross sign, and so that we were able to delete it. Now if you refresh it, you no longer see that database. Alright, so now let's create the database that we're going to use in our analysis, that is sample database. Create similarly like we did earlier, database, call it sample. Now this should create a database called sample, and if you refresh this, sample is created. Now to be able to create table within this sample, we have to activate this first. To make sure that the table that we create is inside this sample database, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this file and then close out this pgadmin, log back in. Give it a second, please. Alright, again repeat the process of providing password and then go to servers. This is the PostgreSQL that we used earlier. Now what I'm going to do is I want to activate this sample, right? I have this here, this is activated. Now any table I create, that should be within sample, schemas, and then tables. Right now I don't have any tables within this, but we will have more tables there. Again, let me open up my file, SQL file that I used earlier. All right, so this is we were earlier, right? So we created the sample. Now we want to create manager table within that sample database. Let's do that. All right, so we have this sample database. So we want to create the manager table inside that database. So for that, we can just use create table manager, and in this table we have three IDs: ID, manager name, and gender. I mean three variables, right? So the manager ID we need to define that as the data type also, and int is the data type for manager ID. Manager name, we define that as a varchar 50 or varchar 50, or manager and gender is 2. And now we have to create this, we created this table. Once we create that table, inside that we have to provide the value for each of the variables, right? So for that we can do insert into this table manager, and then we have all these variables from here: ID, name, and gender. And we have to insert the values, and that can be provided as values. And then for 10, that's the ID, Maya Pradhan, I call it as the manager name, and define the gender as female. Similarly for 20, Reju Rai, male, 30, Prima Chetri, female, and so on until 60. So we have only 6 records in this data, in this table within that database. So let's select this and then run it. Alright, so insert 06, it says the query returned successfully. Now let's see if we have this table and try to return all the variables from that table manager. Select star from manager. There you go. So we have like all the 6 variables returned from them. So it's successfully created. We can also check that from here, going into the sample database. Within that, schemas, public, and tables. Within that table we should have that table created. If you don't see, then you can just go ahead and do the refresh, and then you should be able to see the manager table. We have this manager table here created. Alright, so that's how you create the table inside the database. Similarly, alright, so next let's create the department table. So this is an example of creating department table. We call it department, and it has department ID, department name, and then the constraint. Department ID is considered as a primary key, and also some information about not null. Department ID and department name, we consider that them to be not null. And insert into department. Now we provide the value inside the department, and for the department ID and department name there are marketing, administration, modeling, and engineering. So we created 4 values in there. So let's run this. Next, let's select everything from there and see if it's created. From select from start from department, it should return all the 4 values for all the departments. Alright, marketing, administration, modeling, and engineering, we have the department table now. So right now if you refresh this, you can see department and manager table. Similarly, let's create the employee table. So this is the syntax for employee table. I would encourage you to use this and create the employee table, because we're going to use that in later example as well. So for that, just to go over quickly, we use the similar syntax like create table employee, and where we have different variables like employee ID, first name, last name, gender, hire date, state, salary, manager ID, department ID, job ID, and years in school, and respectively they have their own different data type, and employee ID is the primary key here. And when you use serial, you don't need to provide any int or something like that, because it just provide the serial number with the increment of 1. Now we need to insert the data inside that, And again, I would encourage you to copy and paste this and then try to run it, because you already know how to create different table like department, from manager and department. At this stage, try to create yourself, just typing in. But for the employee table, since this is a little bit involved, you can just copy and paste it here, but the idea is same. You just provide the value for each of those column in that employee table. And we also created some null values as well in this data set, just to provide some variety in the data. Now let's run this and then see if it's created properly. All right, query returned successfully. Now let me run this everything and then see if it's created that. All right, we do have all the variable available, and wherever we provided null, it says null, so those are the missing values for those records. The next is to import from CSV, and for that, there are, as I mentioned earlier, there are two steps. First, we need to create a table in our database to hold the data, and then copy that data from the CSV into this. So we have employee demographics.csv file, and from that file we're going to create the table inside this database, sample database. And for that we can have create table imp demographics, and job title, race, job types, start year, everything, all the required variables. And you can just use select star from imp demographics and then copy that imp demographics again, and then from this is where your CSV file is located, containing all these variables in a table. And then you can just with format CSV header, just copy the header as well, and then you can run this. You can basically run this and then return all the variables available in that imp demographics that's created from the CSV file. This is an example for the table creation using the CSV file. So here is one more example of creating job table. I call it job, the table name, job ID, and job title, provided that, and I have different job ID and job title, like ID, and then different title like sales representative, marketing manager, ML engineer, senior manager, and so on. You can also create this just running this, and you can check if it's available. Again, similarly, select star from job table. All right, there you go. You have this information as well. So we have department table, employee, job, and manager table. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to know more about SQL, then please watch my other videos, and I'll explain more about other function in coming videos as well. Thank you so much. Happy learning. Bye.